Welcome back to Soup Reviews Gielinor Games Season 4. It's been a minute since the Episode 1 review, but I have a good excuse. I got an 8-week-old German short-haired pointer puppy, my dream puppy, and her name is Luna. She's been a handful, but a welcome one. I'm just trying to be a present, active dog dad, so I've spent a lot of my time with her instead of on the computer, but we are back now with the reviews, and I'm really excited to get stuck back into them because I know there's a lot you guys want to hear, there's a lot I want to talk about, so let's get into it. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the Super Channel. We are so close to our goal of 1 million subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Make sure to leave any comments below you guys have about the season, about this episode. I read through every single one of them. If there's any comments I think are worth answering in a future episode, I'll make sure to put them in there and respond to them. Big thanks to Rocket Money for sponsoring this review. More on them later. So let's get into it. Gielinor Games Season 4, Episode 2. The Episode 1 episode is finished. Episode 1 is always, of course, the big one because all the rules are introduced, all the players are introduced, the first challenge happens, the first elimination. So a lot is happening at once, and all of a sudden, we're on to the next episode. Just like that, I feel like all of a sudden we're on Episode 2, and we're down to 19 players. Started with 20, down to 19. The players at this point know all the rules. We have the big ones being the introduction of the Tribunal, where the top 3 players make it into the Tribunal and can vote on one player to send into the elimination game, the banning. We have the Amulet of Choice. We have the big one, which is you can choose who you want to go against in the banning. So lots of crazy changes this season, and I think based off the Episode 1 reaction that I saw in the comments and in the Twitch chat, for example, I think it went over pretty well. I think people were excited for a new type of format and some new change in the season. We started the season with 18 players, and we are now down to 17 after week 1. And here's where the first, I guess, kind of decision I had to make for the format of the season was, am I going to have 2 solo challenges in a row? And the Episode 1, we had a solo challenge because it was a solo season, and I always like kind of doing a solo challenge to start off a solo season, but that means that we went down from 18 players down to 17, so we have an odd number of players coming into week 2. Now, in Season 3, we had the same exact thing, where we started off with 20 people, 1 person got eliminated, and we're down to 19. And what I ended up doing in Season 3 was for the Riddle Challenge, we had 4 teams of 4, and then we had 1 team of 3. So that entire challenge, we had a team with 1 less player than the other ones. And to be honest with you, looking back, at the time I thought it was the right decision, and it kind of worked out. But looking back, I didn't want to do that again. We had multiple challenges in Season 3 where there were team-based challenges, but one team had 1 less player, and every time they got smoked, straight up. It just was never even fair. So I didn't want to bring that back for Season 4. So I said, you know what, let's start off the season with 2 solo challenges in a row. That way we have 2 solo eliminations, and it goes down from 18 to 16. So coming into today, we have, for the first time ever, I think, actually, 2 solo challenges in a row. As you can see from the background, the players are in front of the Chambers of Zarek, which means, probably, I usually give a hint as to what the challenge is going to be based on where the players are standing at the start, right? Kind of our B-roll filming location. Doesn't always happen, but in this case, we're in front of the Chambers of Zarek. Kind of makes sense that the Chambers of Zarek is going to be the focus of today's challenge. The challenge today is called Dodging Death, and this is a really tough challenge, not only to set up, but also for the players to participate in as well. However, this is a challenge that I've wanted to do for a long time. Not necessarily at Ulm, but I've always wanted to do a big tank test with a lot of players in a small room at the same time, and we ended up doing it on Ulm. Now, the setup for this was interesting. Fun fact, we actually had a couple of JMods help out with this challenge because, well, first of all, the amount of time it would take for, I think we had 17 players, and there's me, there's Ali, who's part of the production. Having 20 players in a raid, having to all get through it by ourselves, and having to get to the final phase at home would probably take hours, to be honest with you. But thankfully, I was really fortunate enough to have a couple of JMods, Aiza and Goblin, who came in and actually sped run us through the raid. Sped run, is that a word? Sped run us through the raid. They got us to the final phase at Ulm, so we were from the start of the raid to the final phase at Ulm within, I think, about 20 minutes or so. So I went really quickly. Shout out to them. A couple things to mention before we talk about the challenge. So the first ever Amulet of Choice decision had to be made at this point. V the Victim won the Episode 1 elimination, got the Amulet of Choice, and chose the sabotage option, where you can sabotage another player before a challenge. So he decides to sabotage Torvesta before this challenge, which I believe takes some food away from him, it takes some prayer away from him. He has less supplies compared to everybody else, so it makes this tank test even harder for him. I decided to choose the Great Ulm 4th phase as the place to do this kind of big tank test because, one, there's a lot of skill involved in dodging his skill shots that he has. There's, of course, damage that you can't tank, some is just guaranteed damage, but a lot of it is genuine skill based off what's happening happening around the room, what's hitting you, what everybody else is doing. So it's a tough challenge. But the second thing is that I could get B-roll just by standing outside of the room and getting everybody. And as you guys know, B-roll, these shots where I'm just kind of these overhead shots, these shots in the corners, the flying over shots, all this stuff is stuff I need to make the episode and exciting and hopefully, make it, I guess, professional in a sense. And this Ulm room was nice because I could stand outside the gate, not take any damage, and kind of record all the action. So Allie, who also records B-roll for me and helps out, was there as well getting B-roll, and this is why this area was just kind of perfect for it. Another thing I liked about this challenge was that the B-roll was all authentic. Every single time you guys saw a B-roll shot, it was actually something that was happening during the challenge. For a lot of challenges, we have to recreate scenes and then film them afterwards to give it that professional look. But this time, we were able to film it all as it was happening with two different Orbivoculuses. Allie and I were both doing B-roll. So all the B-roll you guys see was B-roll that was actually happening, which I thought was really cool. We are heading into the holiday season, which means it's important to keep track of your finances for those upcoming Christmas presents, which is why I recommend everyone checks out Rocket Money. Rocket Money is an all-in-one personal finance app that helps you manage your money better. Here's 5 of the best things it can help you do. Cancel unwanted subscriptions, lower your bills, save money, set budgets, and automate your savings. My favorite feature has to be the one that helps you find subscriptions you didn't know you were paying for and helps you cancel them with just a few taps. I found out recently that I was paying for an Xbox Live subscription that I hadn't used for like 5 years. Bad, I know. The budgeting feature is also amazing. I think everyone should budget, especially when it comes to your finances. Knowing where and when your money is coming in and out is so important and sets you up for a healthy and successful financial future. Rocket Money has helped its customers save up to $740 a year when you use the app's premium features. Over 5 million people are using it today. I'd highly recommend checking it out for yourself. Go to rocketmoney.com/super or click the link in the description to get started for free. You can also unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/super. Now, one of the biggest decisions that I had to make was what kind of gear should I give them? What kind of supplies should I give them? I didn't want them to be in there tanking for too long, but I also didn't want them dying too quickly. So I ended up reaching out to quite a few people who are kind of experts in the Chambers of Xeric, and I asked for their feedback and suggestions on what kind of gear I should be giving these people to hopefully have them survive like 15 to 20 minutes or so. And I got a lot of different feedback, and I was really thankful to have them, look over the suggestions and give me suggestions and everything. So we ended up on, the Carol setup. We have the Guardian boots in there. We have the Glory. So they have a little bit of tank on them. And then they also have 4 brews, 3 restores, a stamina potion. And then in there, they also have black d'hide, blue d'hide, and studded. So the decision making was, I was hoping that they would be able to tank for 15 to 20 minutes or so. However, I severely underestimated, and this was on me, how much damage Ulm would be doing. As you guys know, or if you didn't know, Ulm does more damage pretty much the more people that are in the room. It's scaled based on how many players are in the raid. So the fact that we had, 20 people in there meant that the Ulm damage was going to be so much more than usual. So the auto attacks, if you got hit with an auto attack and you weren't praying the right thing, you would be taking a lot of damage. And people started chugging their supplies, their brews very quickly. The other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that I decided to spice up the challenge a little bit by having them do Soup Says challenges while the challenge was going on. My hope was that we could do, 5 to 6 challenges in those 15 to 20 minutes that they're tanking. It would be a fun little, side thing going on as they're tanking Ulm. But I quickly realized that within a few minutes, people were dead. I think the first player dead was Skill Specs, right? Torvesta didn't follow along after. And these guys were dead before the first Soup Says challenge even happened. So I kind of had to make a decision in the moment, like, wait, what do I do now? Do I skip the Soup Says challenges completely? Do I just force them out there to try to make them do something? So I ended up doing the first Soup Says challenge just way earlier. Now, the first Soup Says challenge we did was they had to run to the back of the room. And then the second one was that they had to trade another player in the room. And again, within those were the only 2 Soup Says challenges we were able to fit in the entire time. That's how quickly this challenge went. Guys, I'm not even kidding you when I tell this. From the moment they entered into the Ulm room to the moment the last player died, I believe it was 4 minutes. This entire challenge lasted about 4 minutes. Now, on one hand, sweet, the challenge didn't last that long, less filming time, everybody could go home early that day. But on the other hand, I was just thinking, oh no. As you guys know in the episodes, I like to stretch out the challenges to at least be 20 to 30 minutes or so, and that helps with confessionals, and if the challenges are longer, I can easily fill that in. But with this challenge, I was like, oh my god, there are 17 perspectives of 4 minutes or less that I now have to stretch out into a 20-minute challenge. And I can do that a bit with confessionals, but I knew from the moment this challenge finished that this was going to be a bit of a tougher one to edit in the editing room. Now, from an entertainment perspective, I thought the challenge was entertaining. At least watching it back in the episode, at least as it was going on, I thought it was really exciting to see kind of the different tactics people were using. Some people were staying on the side, some people staying in the back, some people were running the head in the middle, right? Everybody kind of had a different strategy going in, and it did work out for some people, right? There was, of course, RNG involved, as there always is in RuneScape, but I think the 3 players who won this challenge were pretty much the best players in the challenge. They deserve to win. The feedback I got on this challenge was mixed from the players and the viewers. A lot of people enjoyed the more fast-paced, intense tank test, but a lot of players were like, this was kind of repetitive. We were just seeing the same thing from different perspectives the entire time. It was just way too short. There wasn't much going on. Totally fair critique, totally fair criticism. There's a lot I would have done differently about this challenge. Looking back, I definitely would have given them better tank gear. I would have given them way more supplies. I would have done more success challenges. Fun fact about the black D-hide and blue D-hide and studded you guys see in the inventories, the plan, it was kind of funny, the plan was to eventually, if there was too many players left and they were tanking too easily, I was going to have them downgrade their gear. So at 10 minutes, I was going to have them downgrade from their Carols to the black D-hide, 15 minutes to the black D-hide to the blue D-hide. We never even made it to the point where they had to downgrade to the black D-hide because the challenge was over so quickly. So that was a mistake on my end. Here's the thing with challenges. When you're doing something that kind of has never been done before in the main game, you're testing out a challenge like this, the chances of it going flawlessly and perfectly aren't 100%. It very rarely happens. So going into this, I was really hoping it would play out in my mind like it would, but it didn't, and a lot of stuff had to be cut because of it. But again, it's a learning experience, and it's one of those challenges that I can learn from, and then for the future seasons, kind of perfect and hopefully make even better. I also got a lot of really great feedback just from the viewers being like, hey, while this was, an exciting challenge, a lot of people aren't necessarily fans of everybody's in the same room. It's the same perspective pretty much the entire time, because I can switch between people's footage, but it's just from a different angle in the room, right? They're not doing anything different. Everybody's dodging the same thing. Everybody's doing the same thing. And I don't, honestly, from my end, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. However, just because it's something that I think isn't bad doesn't mean I shouldn't take, feedback from the viewers. And it definitely, I would say, in the post-season survey that I did, it was one of the least liked challenges. And I think I understand why, right? I definitely get it. It was too short. It was too repetitive, and people weren't a big fan of it. So would I run this challenge back? Potentially, but I would have to make a lot of changes to it and try to find a make it a way a little bit bigger, or try to find a way to make it even better. I'm actually curious for you guys who subscribe to this second channel, because you're dedicated GG viewers, you want to hear more about it. What were your honest thoughts about it? Feel free to say it was bad. Feel free to say you liked it. Feel free to say whatever you want. You guys being the true GG fans, subscribing to a second channel to hear more about the show means that your feedback is very valid to me. So I definitely will take any and all comments and learn from them and hopefully make the future challenges even better. I do want to make sure to include this in the episode. Now, every single time there is a sabotage chosen by the person who has the amulet of choice, I kind of want to talk about if the sabotage ended up actually making a difference in this challenge. And for me, I think it 100% did. I mean, if you have less supplies in an Ulm tank test, the chances of you making the Tribunal are incredibly low. So not only did Torvesta go in there not necessarily knowing how to, tank Ulm and what was even going on. So the fact that he had a sabotage on top of it, almost guaranteed that he wasn't going to make the Tribunal. And honestly, it worked out perfectly, because him and Skill Specs were the first 2 people out, and that alone is a funny storyline to see them being like, no way, Skill Specs is out. They followed each other. That was one of the funniest moments in the episode. So it really did work out. There was one, I don't think everybody thought this way. Well, I'll talk about this more as the season goes on, but a lot of people said that the sabotages didn't ever make a difference in the episodes. I fully disagree with that, to be honest with you. I think for the most part, there was a couple that didn't maybe have the biggest impact, but I think in this challenge, for example, it 100% did. The thing about the sabotages is I don't want the sabotage to completely destroy somebody's chances of making the Tribunal. I think that's just totally unfair, but I also don't want the sabotage to be too weak where it's like, oh, that barely made a difference, right? So it's actually a really hard balancing act trying to make the sabotage just kind of slide right in the middle. I think it worked out fine for this episode. I think him giving it to Torvesta in a challenge that Torvesta probably was never going to win meant the sabotage felt weaker maybe than it could have been. If he had given the sabotage to somebody who, if I should say a victim, gave the sabotage to somebody who was really experienced at all, somebody like Bodhi, Eevescape, Roydy, Foe, maybe, Settled, even though actually Settled doesn't have that much experience there, but he still did well. I think the sabotage would have felt like it had a bigger impact, right? It's just the fact that he put the sabotage on somebody who was already not necessarily strong at the challenge meant that the sabotage felt weaker. I think you guys know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, even though the challenge was short, there was still a lot of strategy going on. A lot of players who ended up running the head in the middle were the ones who died early. A lot of players thought that if you had to kind of stay in the middle with Olm's attacks, then you would survive longer. But since so many players were staying on the edges and in the back of the room, the head turning meant a lot of people ended up getting screwed. So the players who stayed on the sides and in the back, I think actually had the better strategy for this. And a couple of those players were Eevescape and Settled, who I believe tried staying in the back of the room most of the time. They survived for a long time without eating any, or drinking any brews, I should say, and did really, really well. Roydy took a bit of damage early, I believe. Fun fact about Roydy, he actually didn't record his footage for this episode. That's why you guys never actually see his perspective. I wish I could have shown it because he did really well, but I didn't have his footage, so the only time you see him is in B-roll and maybe a confessional or two. That was definitely the winning strategy for this, though. It actually really comes down to the wire. It's a really exciting ending. I believe 5 players were left, and then 2 game ticks later. If you guys didn't know, a game tick on RuneScape is 0.6 seconds. So 2 game ticks meant that within 1.2 seconds, the players went from 5 to 3, right? So it literally milliseconds decided this challenge. It was so close. Bodhi was in 4th place for this, and if he would have survived a second later, he would have been in 3rd. He would have gotten Tribunal top 3, and this decision today would have potentially been different. But the winners today, Eevescape, who not only was incredibly impressive just in general in this challenge, but he actually was doing this on Australian ping, and he was doing this at like 4 in the morning at his time. So the fact he was up at 4 a.m., he was on Australian ping, he was lagging, means that the Tribunal getting top 3 was incredibly impressive. Roydy gets top 3, a strong PVMer in general, so for him to get top 3 wasn't surprising, but it wasn't easy with how many players were in. So Roydy's first Tribunal, Eevescape's first Tribunal, and we have our first back-to-back Tribunal member, and that, of course, is Settled, who I have to say, honestly, very impressive in this challenge, too. Settled does not go into the Chambers of Zerg. Settled has very little experience at the Great Olm, so for him to go in there with potentially a strategy that he doesn't know is going to work, and it works out, I would say, flawlessly, he not only gets into the top 3 and gets Tribunal, he's the last player alive, and he probably could have stayed alive for minutes longer. He was easily had the most supplies at the end. So genuinely very, very impressive. And at this point, I think the viewers and even me, who was just watching from the sidelines, I was like, oh, he came to play this season, right? He gets first in the first episode with the Tribunal with the incredibly impressive play at the Crafting Guild. And this, he has probably the best strategy. Comes out on top again. I mean, he's looking good to start this season. Those 3 now have to go into the chamber and decide on which player they want to vote for to send into the second banning of the season. Now, at this point, we filmed the first episode on August 15th, 2023, and this next challenge was filmed. So this challenge was filmed, I believe, August 24th of 2023, so it was about 9 days later. I think a lot of the players this season were caught off guard by the twist of you get to choose who you want to go against in the elimination. I think a lot of people came in being like, okay, I'm not going to vote for this person. We're going to be together. We're going to, hopefully ride it or die until the end. So we're going to form this little alliance that never votes, and we always vote for this person to go in. But all of a sudden I announce, hey guys, like you can choose who you go against. And the fact that whoever gets sent in can choose who they want to go against, really, I'm not going to say it nullifies alliances. In fact, alliances, I would say, still are very important because if the person who gets sent in is allied with somebody, they're not going to choose them to go against them. But the kind of the middle of the pack players are like, oh no, like I don't, everybody's up for grabs now. So that really, I think, ingrained in a lot of players' heads that they need to perform to get into the Tribunal, or they really just have to try to become friends with everybody. So no matter who gets sent in to the banning by the Tribunal, they will never be chosen to go against somebody. So it was an interesting dynamic very early on, and it plays a big role later on, which we'll talk about, of course. But I think coming into episode 2, the alliances and what was going to really happen were a bit shaky at this point. So nobody knew what was going to happen with the Tribunal and who would go into the second elimination. Settled, Eevescape, and Roydy is a really interesting Tribunal. And this is why I liked the Tribunal system so much, is because the players who were in there, there aren't always necessarily aligned and sometimes are, in a sense, rivals. Eevescape being in there with Settled, Settled's friends with Framed and Eevescape are rivals, right? That dynamic there is really interesting. Roidy is a rookie, Roidy's with the Farmers, right? So all those three in there means that they have to kind of nominate somebody who they all equally don't want to see later on in the games. And that conversation was really interesting, but they end up targeting West Ham. Now, we have to talk about this pick. This pick starts a series of picks that happen later on in the season, and that is target the PvPers. Target the PvPers. Everybody is scared of PKers in Gielinor Games, and it's really easy to understand. When there is a PK challenge, the PKers dominate it. There's almost a guaranteed chance that a PvPer is going to win a PvP challenge. That's the difference in skill gap. Like Dino, West Ham, Skill Specs, all those guys, all those PKers, they are just top tier in PvP challenges and are almost always going to win. So coming into the season, everybody is just like, oh my God, there's going to be a PvP challenge. We have to get the PKers out of there, because if we get all the PKers out of there before the challenge happens, then, the chance of me actually winning a challenge like that, there's potential there. There's actually a chance I can win, whereas if there's a lot of PvPers left in the tournament, they are guaranteed to win. So targeting the PKers becomes a theme this season. And it actually all started, I think, last season when Bodhi would constantly tell everybody, even in his confessionals, being like, I'm scared of the PKers, I'm scared of the PvPers, they're so good, they're always going to win. So Bodhi's the one who kind of started this whole target the PvPers thing. West Ham, I think, was seen as the strongest PvPer in the entire cast. So Eevescape, Roidy, Settled, they all just kind of agree, you know what, let's just all target a PvPer. He's going to be strong later on when it comes to a PvP challenge. Let's just get him out of here. So they come back. All three votes are for West Ham, who is surprised. I believe he genuinely was surprised by it. I don't think he wanted to be targeted this early. I think he himself said that he performed poorly in the first challenge. He performed poorly in the second challenge. Why would you guys target me? I'm doing so poorly. But the tribunal decision was thinking, ahead in the games and not based off what's happened so far. And that's honestly a smart thing. West Ham gets sent into the second elimination, the second banning of the season, and he has to make a decision. I ask him the question that everybody dreads: who do you want to go against? And this decision, I can't even tell you guys how hard this decision is, because one, you are publicly calling out somebody to go against who you think you could potentially beat. But two, you're calling out, somebody who's potentially your friend who you've talked to in the past, and now there's a chance that you knock them out of the games and they're going to make less money, right? It's a genuinely really difficult decision. West Ham does have a really difficult decision here, and he decides to go for the safe play, which is to choose somebody who he thinks is on the same RuneScape kind of IQ, game knowledge playing field as he is, and that is Skill Spec. So I know the viewers and the players in the season were very sad to hear when West Ham nominated him because he's a fan favorite, but I understand West Ham's pick. He wanted to pick somebody who, it was a fair shot. He doesn't have any beef with Skill Specs, but he kind of just thought, you know what, the chances of this being a game knowledge challenge are very high, so let me pick somebody who is kind of on the same playing field as I am, and let's just go at it. So I understand the pick. Skill Specs, of course, not happy, but who's happy to go into elimination? I mean, some people are during, the later parts of the season, but in this case, I think Skill Specs was also shocked to hear his name called out. And there we have it, West Ham against Skill Specs in the second banning of the season. Now, let me tell you, I've never heard West Ham so happy when I'm announcing the challenge and I post a picture of a PvP setup in the Discord. West Ham goes, oh my God, yes, let's go. The chances of this being a PvP elimination are already low. We have very few PvP eliminations during the season, but the fact that it happens when West Ham is the one who was nominated and he nominated another PKer, it was kind of the perfect storm for him. I mean, when you choose somebody to go against, you really are gambling because you don't know what the elimination challenge is going to be. You kind of pick somebody who you think you can beat most of the time and just hope that when the elimination challenge is announced, when the banning challenge is announced, you can beat them in that. The fact that this was a PvP challenge meant that West Ham, I wouldn't say he caught a break, but it was really fortunate for him to be sent in on the week where there was a PvP elimination. Now, the elimination is called Old School, and this is a challenge where the players are fighting a best-of-3 Tribrid PvP fight where they're using gear that could be obtained when Old School RuneScape first came out in 2013. So none of the new gear that's come out, it's not going to be a fight with really high damage and high specs and everything like that. It's more of an Outlast fight, and that's exactly what happens in this challenge. Now, the twist on this challenge, I really wanted to add more to it. I didn't want it just to be like a PvP fight for 3 rounds. That wouldn't have been too exciting, but the twist we have is for the first time ever on Gielinor Games, there's a physical limitation here. The players are not allowed to use their keyboards during this fight, which is really big because F keys are such an important part of just the game these days. If you guys don't know, F keys, you can change them F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, or whatever to switch to your inventory, to switch to your prayers, right? To switch to your spec bar. It makes the entire process way quicker and it's more skill-based if you have F keys. However, we're going back to 2013 when, I'm going to say F keys weren't necessarily as popular or even a thing. I don't even remember. So they can only use their mouse for this challenge. They can only use their mouse. This means that switching your gear, switching to a different tab to switch your prayer, eating, your special attack, all that stuff is way slower and now way harder. That was the twist for the elimination. I was actually a really big fan of this. I thought it was a really cool twist. I don't know about you guys, but I just thought it was really cool that I think both of them actually unplugged their keyboards because they were so accustomed and so used to using it that they just had to unplug their keyboards to make sure they wouldn't accidentally do anything. So all they have is their mouse. So going into this fight, it's actually the first fight between the two is very close. West Ham is definitely the heavy favorite here. West Ham, I can't even explain how good West Ham is, not only compared to everybody in this cast at PvP, but just in the game. Of all the PvP content creators, West Ham is definitely up there. He is in the S tier, no doubt. So West Ham comes in as the favorite. Skill specs, again, I know we like to say, it's skill specs. People like to, joke around and clown on him. But he is skilled at PvP. I'm just going to say it. You can say whatever you want. He is a good PvPer. And we can see that in the first fight. Skill specs is up at parts during the fight. I mean, there's a chance that Skill specs wins this first fight. But in classic Skill specs fashion, it all goes downhill when he gets hit with like a 54 Dragon Bolt, gets hit with another Dragon Bolt through prayer. He goes from being up on food to being down on food within, I think, about 15 seconds, Skill specs being up to Skill specs being dead. So West Ham takes the first fight. Skill specs knows that he probably should have won that first fight, and knowing Jay, knowing skill specs, that is triggering him beyond belief. It's a classic case of skill specs gets bad RNG in a PvP fight, and you can tell, I could tell in the call, everybody could tell, and you can even tell in the episode, he was not happy to lose that first fight. So now he has to re-gear, re-get his stuff. We head to East Dragons in in the Wilderness, a classic spot for this second fight, and in this fight, West Ham turns it on. You can see it. Here's the crazy thing. West Ham, he made it seem like he had his F keys available to him. That's how quickly he was switching and how he was clicking, and he was just feeling himself during this fight, and it was an absolute stomp in the second one. Props to Skill Specs for putting up a really good fight in that first fight. West Ham was just feeling himself in that second fight. I don't blame him for getting taken down like that. It is what it is. But just like that, the fight is over, and we have Skill Specs gone in episode 2. I just want to throw in there that some people do say that I choose eliminations based on who goes into the challenge, but that is 100% completely false. You can ask Allie. There's receipts in our DMs. I always tell her this is going to be the challenge and this is going to be the elimination today. That never changes based off who goes in. This one just happened to be the case of 2 PKers going to a PK challenge, and I think for the viewers that's better, because if this was a PvPer versus, for example, somebody who doesn't PvP at all, it would have been an absolute wash. So that's the tough thing about these PK challenges, man. If there's a PKer in there and then there's a non-PKer in there, it's like almost 100% chance that the PKer is going to win. So the fact that at least we had 2 PvPers in here meant that it was an entertaining fight for the most part. West Ham is the first rookie to win a banning this season, and we lose Skill Specs in episode 2. Skill Specs, I'm just going to straight up say it, one of my favorite Gielinor Games players of all time. He brings such a unique... He's just so unique on the games. He always manages to make everything entertaining. He's so funny, and the cast and the viewers absolutely love him. So to lose him this early was definitely devastating. I could tell a lot of people were just sad to lose him, and he was really sad as well. In his confessionals, he was devastated. He was so sad, and I know he's going to want to come back in the future and redeem himself. So cheers, Skill Specs. I appreciate you being on the season. Unfortunately, leaving early this time around. West Ham, though, really well deserved, really well earned first banning win. We now have the decision that he has to make of what he wants from the Amulet of Choice. He can choose partial immunity next week, where he can't be chosen to go against in the banning. He can receive 200 million GP, or he can sabotage another player. And we have another sabotage choice for him. He's already rich, doesn't care about the money, doesn't care about the immunity. He wants to sabotage somebody. So heading into week 3, we have another sabotage. Just like that, Gielinor Games Season 4 is down to 16 players. Now we have 16 players. We've had 2 solo challenges already this season. I think everybody kind of could guess that the next episode was going to be a team challenge, but we're going to save that for the next episode. I'll be doing a RuneScape hide and seek event, Gielinor GG style today. Right after this video goes live, it'll be live on this YouTube channel and on my Twitch, so if you've ever wanted to play some Gielinor and win some prizes, make sure to tune in and play. If you would like to see these episodes before anyone else, make sure to subscribe to my Patreon. For just a couple of bucks a month, you can support my content, get access to a bunch of behind-the-scenes Gielinor Games footage, and you get to hear me read your name out loud in these videos. My Dragon Tier legends, Alderon, Alec, Butcher Q, Caroline, Flamo, Irish Wristwatch, nailed it, Jason, Josh, Katie, Kitten Robber, Lacey, Moo Cow, Mr. Monotone, Aniko, Rainman MP, and the Owl 909. To my Rune Tier kings and queens like Alex, Coniflex, Dice to Damage, and Flawed RS. My Adamant Tier lovers like Burger Meat, Jedaminas, Chrissy, and Taggart. You guys are absolute legends. Thank you all so much for the support. I'll see all of you in the next upload, which will hopefully be very, very soon.